This is a book called President Donald J. Trump, the Son of Man, the Christ. Now, somebody sent me a picture of this book at a Trump rally a while back. Apparently, the guy who wrote it, Helgard Muller, has been going to Trump rallies, passing a copy of his book out to everybody. Let me give you an idea of the premise of the argument here. In the Bible, there are two messianic roles. There's a Son of God and the Son of Man. The Son of God was obviously fulfilled by Jesus. He came to earth, died for your sins, and all of that other good stuff, right? The Son of Man is referred to in the Bible in a number of Old Testament books. The book of Daniel, I think, mentions the Son of Man, the book of Ezekiel, and some others. The Son of Man is supposed to be like a cosmic judge who comes along at the end, sparks Armageddon into existence, and judges all of the good people and the bad people, basically. The assumption is that Jesus is going to come back a second time, take control of the Israeli political system. That's why Israel needs to exist as a nation before Jesus could come back, because that's one of the requirements for the Son of Man, for somebody to be the Son of Man, and then spark Armageddon into place. That's the belief among standard Christianity. This guy's argument, Helgard Muller, is that America is the new Israel, that the founding fathers were descendants of the original Jews that came up through the Caucasus Mountains or whatever else. Complete nonsense, just totally made up. And that Trump took control of the political system in New Israel, which made him the Son of Man. So that is their argument for Trump being the second coming of Jesus. That's what this book is all about, so I wanted to give it a read. We've been reading it already. If you haven't seen the previous parts, don't sweat it. You don't have to see the others to understand what's happening in the current chapter. Do not believe literally a single fact, a single statistic, a single word out of this guy's mouth, just based on what I've already read. Even the most basic facts, like the names of political parties or the translation of words, are wrong. He lies about them constantly. So before you believe a single thing out of this book, make sure you fact check it. And one more thing before we actually get into the book. Some of it can be pretty graphic. The guy is a rabid racist, does not like the black community, grew up in South Africa during the period of segregation called apartheid, and is very obviously an extremely hateful person. So just be aware of that before walking into the book. Without further ado, let's get into it. In the previous part, this is just like part 2 of the introduction that we're going to be hitting today. In the previous one, he talked about being fond of apartheid South Africa when he was a kid. Seriously. Dude grew up in South Africa and loved apartheid. The apartheid era, if you're unfamiliar, was a period of time where segregation was forced between blacks and whites. They were not allowed to go to the same schools, live in the same neighborhoods. And it was kind of a situation where the white colonizers came to South Africa and took control of the government and forced the poorer black community or black population into slums, basically. It was an absolutely disgusting, ugly period of time that is up there with slavery, with how evil it was. And this guy who has come up with this idea that Trump is the new Messiah is talking about how fantastic it was and how much he loved it. Unhinged stuff. He also talked about having met a congressman, Mr. King, to talk about the white genocide that's happening in South Africa. It's fabricated. It's not happening. But they realize that if you play the persecution card, then people care. So that's the card that they're playing here. Doing everything they can to make people think that they are persecuted terribly. The innocent white colonizers in South Africa who persecuted and held down the black population for hundreds of years are so persecuted. Those poor people, right? All right, let's keep reading. I think it starts right here. This is where we left off. In his opening statement before the Zondo Commission of Inquiry into State Capture, starting 4 days of testimony, Ramaphosa, I'm not sure who Ramaphosa is. I'm not familiar with South African politics, so we're going to do a little bit of research as we go through this. Ramaphosa is a South African businessman and politician who, since 2018, is serving as the 5th democratically elected president of South Africa, as well as president of the African National Congress since 2017. And he is a black guy, which means that this guy, Helgard Muller, who wrote this book, absolutely hates him. He's made that clear up to this point. So it says, Ramaphosa said that the leaders and members of the ANC, which is kind of like BLM for South Africa, I believe, a deeply, deeply hated group by the type of person that this guy is. Ramaphosa said the leaders and members of the ANC had been part of state capture. South African President Cyril Ramaphosa said the government party could and should have done more to prevent corruption under his predecessor, Jacob Zuma, in highly anticipated testimony to a graft inquiry. Again, I'm not super familiar with South African politics, but I automatically am suspect of everything that this guy says in this book. I'm planning to write a book called Black People of South Africa. Oh, God. Pre-1994 and post-1994. I can't imagine what would be in that book, but I guarantee it wouldn't be good. I believe that the eyes of the Western world will be open to what these racist black people have done since 1994 in South Africa and how they destroyed Western civilization as we know it. Yeah, the black people in South Africa only wanted fairness and equality after being colonized by I believe they're called Boers. The Boers, they're basically white colonizers who came to South Africa. Deeply evil what happened to the black population in South Africa. Deeply evil. And this guy defends it. The African National Communist, which is ANC, also stands for the African National Corrupt, for they are very well known for money laundering, racketeering, and horrendous crimes in South Africa. Like I said, the ANC is kind of like the Black Lives Matter of South Africa, in that they're constantly being harassed and criticized and attacked by the far right. So take it for what you will. Today, as a grown man, I fully appreciate and respect Hendrik Verwoerd, who was the architect and father of apartheid in South Africa. Oh my God. I can't believe that there are actually people out there who are in favor of apartheid and speak highly of it and respect the founders or creators or architects or whatever. But knowing now that there are people out there like that, it really doesn't surprise me at all to know that they're Trump supporters. I'd be surprised if they weren't, honestly. The ANC of South Africa, African National Communist, I guess, organization, is working currently on the Prevention and Combating of Hate Crimes and Hate Speech bill. Seems like a good thing, right, at face value? That will target religious views of Christians. See, it's my religious right to hate black people. It's my religious right to do so. And by telling me I can't hate them, you are trampling on my religious rights. That's basically like the thought process here that they're laying out. No joke. They're pushing through the Prevention and Combating of Hate Crimes and Hate Speech bill, and that will target religious views of Christians. Does it get any more on the nose than that? Seriously. Like various portions of Scripture, particularly on contentious issues such as life, gender, sexual orientation, God, who is an apartheid activist, God was an apartheid activist? Remember, apartheid was a period of history in South Africa where they segregated black people and white people, and the white colonizers ruled over the black people and relegated them to slums, basically. I had no idea God was an apartheid activist. This is actually news to me. And God, who is against mixed races. Didn't know that one either. Okay. All of which are being regarded as politically incorrect. Yeah, fair enough. I would say being opposed to mixed races is most definitely politically incorrect. I can agree with that one for sure. Increasingly, therefore, religious persons or organizations are being taken to court simply for preaching or teaching their faith. The African National Communists, or ANC as he's been referring to them, are targeting religious freedom and religious speech. I think this speaks for itself. I don't even feel like I need to add commentary to this. This is insane. Oh my God. These African communists, ANC, took out Christian prayer and God from government and parliament when they took over from the white people in 1994, when they turned white South Africa into present hole as it is known for. Remember, Trump famously referred to countries as shithole countries if they were like developing countries or whatever. That gave people like this guy, Helgard Muller, free license to refer to his country as a pull for ending segregation. This is nuts. This is absolutely nuts. It was actually against the law to have a mixed race baby during apartheid. That one's from Lily and Cat. I appreciate that. Yeah, I did not realize that, but it totally makes sense. The dude is talking about how fantastic apartheid Africa was. It makes sense that he would be in favor of ending mixed race marriages or whatever. This is just insane, dude. Insane. Does the Arabic word kafir bring a new meaning to these African national communists in South Africa who took God out of schools and government? Okay, we're going to have to look this one up because I don't know what that word means. Kafir is an Arabic and Islamic term which, in the Islamic tradition, refers to a person who disbelieves in God, as per Islam, or denies his authority, or rejects the tenets of Islam. So it's like atheist, basically. Or non-believer, or apostate, probably more accurately. The term's often translated as infidel, pagan, rejecter, denier, disbeliever, unbeliever, non-believer, and non-Muslim. Okay, there you go. So let's read that sentence again with that information in mind. Does the Arabic word, or apostate, or infidel, bring a new meaning to these African national communists in South Africa who took God out of schools and government? It sounds to me like the black population in South Africa. I am actually suddenly deeply in favor of the black population. Like, I had no dog in this fight at all. I knew nothing about the politics. But honestly, I'm seriously starting to side with the black population just based on what this guy is saying here. They took God out of schools and government. That's a fantastic move. Religion has historically been used to manipulate and oppress populations of people. That's probably why they took God out. That's one of the steps that you should take when creating a democracy. Matter of fact, that's why the founding fathers took God out of government or prevented God from ever becoming part of government. Specifically, that's the first amendment they put in to the Constitution because they recognized it gets ugly every single time. Every time they bring God in because it's a manipulation tool. I would say I'm pleasantly surprised by the fact that these black South Africans decided to remove God from government. That's really good news. It sounds like they were building a new government the way that it should be built. That's a fantastic step to take. Let's read that sentence one more time for context. Does the Arabic word bring a new meaning to these African national communists in South Africa who took God out of schools and government? Definitely, especially when you see the corrupt style of government they have implemented since 1994, when these black communists took over and opened our borders and no one gets persecuted from their horrendous crimes. I think he meant prosecuted. No one gets prosecuted for their horrendous crime. Two different words. Prosecuted means facing legal consequences for a crime that you committed. Persecuted means mistreated for something that you've done or that you haven't done. Just mistreatment in general. So I'm assuming what he meant was prosecuted for their horrendous crimes. But aside from that, I'm starting to wonder if the ANC even uses the word communist. Oh, how about that? Would you believe it if I told you it doesn't actually stand for African National Communists? You know what it actually stands for? The African National Congress. African National Congress. See, this is what I mean. Don't trust literally one word out of the guy's mouth. Not one word. You have to look up everything because he slips stuff in there without you even realizing. I thought he was just giving us the name of an organization. It's not the African National Communists. It's the African National Congress. It's a social democratic political party in South Africa. Kind of like the Democrats in the U.S. Maybe not even like the Democrats. More like the Bernie Sanders wing of the party, it sounds like. A liberation movement known for its opposition to apartheid. It has governed the country since 1994, when the first post-apartheid election installed Nelson Mandela as president of South Africa. Wow. Wow, dude. This should be evidence that you cannot trust a word out of this guy's mouth. Not one single word. They're not communists. They're social democrats. They're not even socialists. They aren't even like AOC level. They're moderate Democrats, probably a little bit more to the left of the Democratic Party in the U.S. It sounds to me. My God, dude. All right, let's keep reading. What is interesting about the word or which again means infidel in Arabic. Probably a more faithful translation to like a Christian word would probably be apostate. What is interesting about the word or is that it's an Arabic word. He's using some he's using different fonts in this, and I don't know, it's giving us weird results. Plural, or he's got a bunch of different tenses and stuff of the word. So anyway, it's an Arabic term which in the Islamic tradition refers to a person who disbelieves in God as per Islam, or denies the authority of God, or rejects the tenets of Islam. The term is often translated as infidel, pagan, rejecter, denier, so on. Yeah, we read that a minute ago on Google. The term is used in different ways in the Quran, with the most fundamental sense being ungrateful towards God. Okay, I don't get that impression. I just get the impression it's talking about disbelievers. I don't know about ungrateful or whatever. I feel like that's a little bit of a reach, but okay. Means unbelief, to be thankless, to be faithless, or ingratitude. That may be the root of it, but that's not really what the word means ordinarily to ordinary people. I don't get that impression. The South African government, or the ANC communists, once again, they're just social democrats, not communists, but okay. The ANC communists introduced controversial legislation banning the use of hurtful and abusive words such as and establishing special courts to combat racial discrimination, but still outlawing white people from the workplace by enforcing strict BBBEE policies, banned Afrikaans in most sectors as a white colonial language, and the controversial list of legislation laws against white people of the ANC is growing longer by the moment. Yeah, I don't really believe any of this. There are some things that he's said so far that if this actually happened, I would be opposed to some degree. I'm not convinced of literally a single word out of his mouth now, and I don't feel like going into a deep dive of South African politics, so I'm just going to leave it at that. I don't believe that he's telling the truth. Be very skeptical. Is also equivalent to saying the N-word in South Africa. Oh, really? I did not know that. Oh my God. I appreciate that. I had no idea. Should I not be saying it? There are a lot of words in this book that I probably shouldn't say. Maybe I should censor them. Not even because it's wrong, but, I mean, for that reason, obviously, but also because YouTube probably wouldn't like it. I probably shouldn't be saying it. I can say it. Moving forward on the live streams, I'll just say K-word, because I had no idea it was an ethnic slur. I did not know that. Good thing you guys told me. Okay, let's keep reading. So he was complaining about the ANC, the African National Congress, I believe is what it stands for, banning the use of hurtful and abusive words such as the K-word, which we now know to be an ethnic slur. I had no idea up until this moment. And establishing special courts to combat racial discrimination. It's basically like the N-word. Black Africans in South Africa. That's basically what it is. And they banned that word because it was used as a tool of oppression and persecution against a historically persecuted group. So that completely makes sense. I did not realize it was a slur. Okay, let's keep going. But still outlawing white people from the workplace by enforcing strict BBBEE policies, banned Afrikaans in most sectors as a white colonial language. God, I feel like I'm missing some cultural context, but I'll try to find the cultural context in my chats as we go along. If somebody's watching this video who's familiar with this cultural context, please come and watch me read this live and help me with this cultural context as I read this book. I do it every Wednesday and Thursday morning, 11 a.m. to 2:30 p.m. on my unfiltered YouTube channel and on Twitch. Usually I read the book a little bit later in the day, so around between noon and 2:30. So anyways, let's keep reading. So they banned the Afrikaans language in most sectors as a white colonial language, and the controversial list of legislation laws, they don't sound controversial. They sound like exactly what they should have done to kind of straighten out the country after years and years, like decades of segregation and systemic hatred and oppression and persecution. There is no democracy in Africa, only dictatorship. No, that's what we had before. That's what it was before. There was actual dictatorship before apartheid ended, or colonialism at the very least. Everything was run by the small minority of white people, and apartheid finally ended. I honestly have no idea how that got accomplished. It's honestly impressive. And now we have democracy, actual democracy. But since this guy doesn't seem to be a fan of being an equal with people that he hates, with black people, he views it as a dictatorship, even though it is not. Honestly sad. South Africa has the highest rate in the world of 132.4 reported incidents for every 100,000 people. Again, do not trust a single word out of this guy's mouth. This very easily could be completely made up. According to a new report released by Bloomberg, South Africa has the highest unemployment rate on a global list of 82 countries, as the jobless rate increased to 44.4%. Why would there be a global list of 82 countries when there are 192 countries in the world? That's kind of weird that he would throw that out there. So he says it increased to 44.4 from 43.2% in the first quarter of 2021. I am extremely skeptical. Maybe that was around the time the coronavirus was spreading around the world, and South Africa actually suffered terribly. A variant came out of South Africa. I think it was a Delta variant. I forget now. Anyway, it was not good at all. South Africa has the biggest HIV epidemic in the world, with 7.7 million people living with HIV. Wow, I didn't know that. Again, don't trust a word out of his mouth. Let's find out. Fascinating. Actually, it's 5.7 million citizens in South Africa infected with HIV, not 7.7 million. How about that? Yet another example of not trusting a word out of this guy's mouth. Not one. The HIV pandemic is most severe in southern Africa. Not South Africa, but the southern portion of Africa. So South Africa is a country. Specifically, it's the name of a country, South Africa is. Southern Africa is a region, because Africa is a continent, not a country, right? So Southern Africa is getting hit the worst with the HIV pandemic. Over 10% of all people infected with HIV/AIDS reside within the region of Southern Africa, not South Africa. Adult HIV prevalence exceeds 15% in Eswatini, Botswana, and Lesotho, with an additional 6 countries report adult HIV prevalence of at least 10%. Okay, so Southern Africa has the highest case rate. He said South Africa in the context of the country that he came from, an inaccurate representation of the situation. HIV prevalence in the general population is as high as 20.4%. Is that true? Population of South Africa. There are 60 million people in the country of South Africa. 5.7 million have HIV in South Africa. So 5.7 million divided by 59,310,000. So the case rate is actually 9.6% in South Africa. This book is not that old. These stats are still relevant. He says the general population is at 20.4%. No, that's twice as high as it is. Over twice as high. He wants to make it out like it's a quote-unquote hole, as Trump called it, as he called it a minute ago. South Africa is ranked as the 3rd most dangerous country in the world, according to Numbeo's 2021 crime index. Okay, I don't know why I would be talking about Numbeo, who this guy Numbeo is, or why I would care, or why he even has a crime index. But once again, it's become very plain and obvious to me that we can't trust a word out of the guy's mouth. Let's keep going. With 6 local cities among the 20 most dangerous globally. Globally, South Africa ranks 3rd, the same level as 2020, and below only Venezuela and Papua New Guinea, with a crime score of 77.07 and safety score of 22.03. It is considered a high-crime, low-safety country. Well, I think it is considered a high-crime and low-safety country because it just escaped apartheid. So naturally, like not even that long ago, there are people who are just coming to adulthood who experienced apartheid. So it ended in 1994, officially. And things have been on a slow, progressive change ever since. So there are still people who experience serious racism in South Africa as children who are alive right now. This is only 25 years ago when this ended, basically. Or close to 30, maybe 28 years ago. South Africa is one of 5 African nations ranked in the top 20 most dangerous countries, ahead of Namibia, Angola, Nigeria, and Libya, and ranks ahead of war-torn nations including Afghanistan, 4th, Syria, 9th, as well as the world's murder capital, Honduras, 5th. Yeah, I don't believe any of this, honestly. None of these facts are accurate, I would be willing to bet. I mean, I just picked a random fact out of the book that he gave us, HIV prevalence among the general population in South Africa, and it was wrong. It was less than half of what he said. It's completely made up. All of this stuff is completely untrustworthy as far as I'm concerned. Overall, the highest scoring crime category for South Africa is corruption and bribery. Of course, because the black communists are in control, is that right? White commercial farmers are 4.5 times as likely to get murdered as South African population as a whole. Okay, so what he's talking about here, these are the farm killings. He's desperately trying to make it out as though white people are being killed en masse. It's completely fabricated. It's made up. The white farm killings are not an indication of genocide, white genocide in South Africa. From my understanding, there have been some cases of farmers being attacked. That does not equate to genocide. He uses that word a little too freely, and I talked about this in the previous chapter if you want to go back and read a little bit more about it, but complete nonsense. It's just his persecution complex rearing its ugly head once again. Yeah, and one more thing about this I want to point out, the HIV prevalence in South Africa, or in the southern region of Africa generally, is also partly thanks to the Catholic Church demonizing condoms. Somebody pointed that out in the chat a minute ago. Idiosyncrasy 666. I appreciate that. That's a good point. It's thanks to the Christian population in South Africa, not thanks to the black population, which is exactly who he's blaming here. I think Lauren Southern or some white female reporter did something on white farmers being attacked and killed in South Africa. She's pushing white supremacy conspiracy. Yeah, I believe it was Lauren Southern was spreading this conspiracy that, white people are under attack and they're hated and blah, 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 all to further her goal of white nationalism, which is exactly what Helgard Muller is in favor of, white nationalism. According to AfriForum, 156 white commercial farmers are killed per 100,000. Again, don't trust a word out of the guy's mouth. This is probably completely fabricated. I just don't feel like looking it up. You feel free to look it up yourself and let me know in the comments if this is accurate or not. White farmers in South Africa are being wiped out by black people. Methodically. No, that's completely fabricated. It is not happening on a systemic, methodical basis. They're not trying to take out white people in South Africa. This is all white supremacist, extremist conspiracy. The murder rate for average South Africans is 34 per 100,000. For white farmers, it's 156 per 100,000. Okay, he's playing with statistics here, and once again, don't trust a word out of his mouth. In a country cursed by one of the world's highest murder rates, being a white farmer makes a violent death an even higher risk. The rate of murders in South Africa is the highest in the world. The White Cross Monument is a memorial site for victims, white people, that were and murdered in South Africa over the past 20 years. The monument is unique in the world as it grows annually, with more crosses being added each year to commemorate the latest victims of systematic white genocide. No, this is a delusion this guy lives in. It's a delusional white nationalist conspiracy theory that he's spreading here, and I simply cannot allow it to spread. This is ridiculous. This is not happening. South Africa is ruled with an iron fist by white nationalists, by people who segregated the black population into slums. And suddenly, equality appears. Suddenly, segregation ends, and everybody has to get along and has an equal vote. And wouldn't you know it, now we have a bunch of white people coming out and screaming and crying until they're blue in the face that they are being persecuted. This is the right-wing playbook. You think equality is oppression because you've never experienced what it's like to be on the same level of everybody else. When all you know is privilege, equality feels like oppression. He's talking about a monument, apparently, that's located in a hillside. It can be found on the road between something or other and Petersburg in the Transvaal province of South Africa. So far, over 4,000 crosses have been erected at the monument by families and friends of the victims. Many of the crosses are arranged in a pattern to form a large white cross, giving the landscape its name. The number of crosses represents only a small fraction of the people that were murdered. I'd love a little evidence for this. There's no evidence of white genocide. It's all just far-right fear-mongering nonsense. I looked this up in the last section, like I said. If you're really curious, we go on a whole thing to figure out if this is real or not. Estimates of the actual number of white people murdered by black people vary, with some as high as 90,000. Deeply doubt it. I'm sorry. Hard doubt. I need evidence. This is a book. He could have provided links and sources and stuff with footnotes. He chose not to. Wonder why. That's weird, huh? Every year, more and more crosses are added. I've lost several friends who were brutally murdered in South Africa. Mr. Ben Fizzer, the father of my childhood best friend Karen Fizzer, was violently murdered in his own house on Sunday, April 9th, 2006, in my hometown, Lewis Tricard, where I grew up. Well, if this is true, I feel bad for that. I'm sorry. I hope that doesn't happen. I don't like that. I just have learned not to trust a word out of the guy's mouth, so. Louis Smuts, his wife Belinda, and his parents, Gert. Wow, what a name. That is a metal name if I've ever heard one. Gert, G-E-R-T. What a bad name, right? Gert and Paulina were killed on their farm outside Balfour in Transvaal on Monday, February 13th, 2017. Hard doubt again, I'm sorry. My friend Belinda was by the two accomplices before they killed her. The victim list of the white genocide in South Africa is growing endless. Yeah, I'm sorry. I just don't buy it. I feel like what he's doing here is anytime a white person is the victim of a crime of any sort, it's out of persecution. And every time a black person is the victim of crime of any sort, it's because they're bad. That's the impression that I'm getting from this guy. I wish I knew more about South African politics, but I'd be willing to bet I'm going to know a lot about how it works by the end of this. Kill the Boer. Boer, by the way, I don't know if I'm pronouncing it correctly, but it's basically the white people, the white colonizers in South Africa is what that means. Kill the Boer, government complicity in South Africa's brutal farm murders by Ernst Rowitz, activist, attorney, and deputy CEO of the civil rights organization AfriForum, lays bare the brutal reality of farm attacks in South Africa. Yeah, the farm attacks are fabricated, like I said earlier. He's just going to keep going on about this nonsense indefinitely, isn't he? Among other things, it investigates the level of complicity in the crisis by the South African government. The book reveals accounts of direct involvement of members of the ruling ANC, the South African government, and the South African Police Service, SAPS, in the planning and execution of farm attacks. Yeah, just because some random book says it doesn't make it true. I don't care what the book claims. I need hard evidence. Give me evidence. You have written a book here. You could have submitted the evidence to us through the book. What did he do? He didn't put any footnotes in. He didn't put any citations. He didn't tell us where to find the evidence. He lists some obscure book by some guy and claims that this book details it. I need more than that. I'm sorry. Rowitz also argues that the South African media is complicit as analyses of news reports strongly point toward biased reporting on the issue of farm attacks and farm murders. See, everybody is contributing to this evil. The media is out to get them. The government's out to get them. Everyone's out to get them all the time. They were historically the colonizers, the people in control, the people who mistreated the black population, and they're the victims, as always. No wonder he loves Trump. His personality is a perfect match. Constantly the victim. By the by, Elon Musk grew up in South Africa, in this environment, in apartheid South Africa. Think about that. This is where the far right is in South Africa. I don't know if Elon Musk holds these views. I don't know how he feels about apartheid or segregation or any of that other stuff, but try to jive Elon Musk with the beliefs we find here. Kind of interesting to think about. Kill the Boer outlines the reasons why farm attacks are unique and why it deserves to be regarded as a priority crime. Rowitz has been actively campaigning for the prioritizing of farm attacks since 2012. Andile Mingstama? I feel like I pronounced it wrong, but I did my best. Leader from Black First Land First, BLF, made a political speech in 2018 where he said, oh, God, I can't read some of this. All right, I'm going to skip over this quote. If you want to read it, feel free. It's basically him trying to establish the idea that black people hate white people there, and white people did nothing wrong, which is, of course, a complete fabrication. Julius Malema, Commander-in-Chief of the Economic Freedom Fighters, EFF, is also held personally responsible for openly preaching hatred and violence against white people. He even openly advocated a civil war on white people. Julius Malema told a television presenter in 2018 that he didn't call for the killing of white people, at least not for now. Yeah, there is a lot of tension, political tension between the white and the black population there. This guy is adding to it, without a shadow of a doubt. He is contributing to this political strife, and he's proud of that. He wants to get rid of the black population in South Africa. I think that's obvious. President Donald Trump, here we go, tweeted several tweets about South Africa in the past, and that he is fully aware how corrupt these black people are in South Africa, and that the ANC was a well-known terrorist organization before 1994 who went out there to kill white South Africans. Complete delusion. Complete delusion. I don't even know if Trump said this. Maybe, but just remember, don't trust a word out of the guy's mouth. He's completely full of it from beginning to end. Since 1994, the killing of white people has never ceased under the ANC rule, but in fact, it's out of control, and the ANC with the EFF needs to be wiped off the face of the earth, just like Al-Qaeda and ISIS, who are a threat to the Western world, the free world. So the ANC is just a democratic party. It blows me away that he compares a political party that is middle-of-the-road, vanilla, moderate, at best, kind of social democrat style, to ISIS. That's nuts. Mr. Donald Trump's tweet on land seizure, killing of white farmers, angered black people in South Africa, white liberals, and the Jewish media in the U.S. and across the Western world. Notice that little section about Jewish media again? Yeah, here's the thing. I discovered this not too long ago. There's this book that was published, I think 1905 is when this book was compiled, but it's called The Protocols of the Elders of Zion. Let me just give a 30-second rundown of what this is. There are 27 protocols, and they're just little sections that talk about, like, various different plans for world domination. They claim to have found these protocols on Jewish soldiers in the late 1800s, early 1900s. And they published each of these 27 supposed protocols from Jewish elders for world domination. They published them in newspapers in Russia in the early 1900s, 1902 to 1905 roughly. 1905 rolls around. This guy compiles them all into a single book called The Protocols of the Meetings of the Learned Elders of Zion. And he writes all about the Jewish blah, blah, blah. This is the heart of all conspiracy theories. This conspiracy theory this guy is espousing here about Jewish media, that's from this. That's from the Protocols of the Elders of Zion. No joke. This is the original Nazi propaganda. Like I said, created in Russia originally, but it was repeated and mass-produced and passed out in Germany during World War II by Hitler's propaganda minister, Joseph Goebbels, I think is how it's pronounced. He also mentioned it in Mein Kampf. This is the heart of every single conspiracy theory in existence today. The Great Reset, the Great Replacement, that whole adrenochrome thing where you kids' blood and ritual sacrifices to children and all this stuff. It's also the source of the satanic panic. This is all stuff they claimed that Jews were doing, taking over the banks, the media, the militaries, all positions of power and all that stuff. It's all in this conspiracy-laden book that was released. It is probably one of the most influential books ever produced in the history of ever, I would be willing to say. And here we see this guy, Donald Trump, the Son of Man, the Christ, author, talking about the Jewish media straight out of the Protocols of the Elders of Zion. Straight out of it. By the by, I will be reading the Protocols of the Elders of Zion on my Telltale Reads YouTube channel in the near future, so keep a lookout for that if you're curious about what else it has to say. It's absolutely unhinged. By the by, I do want to say this is a total forgery. I just want to put that on record. It was faked. Supposedly found on a Jewish soldier, it was not. It was actually plagiarized in large part from a book in the 1850s, a French book that had no mention of Jewish people. It was a satire book that was written. But anyway, it's neither here nor there. Let's keep reading this guy. And the Jewish media in the U.S. and across the Western world. Cyril Ramaphosa, which again I believe is the president of South Africa currently, a black guy, the corrupt and deceitful president of South Africa, an ANC communist, he is not a communist, he's a social democrat, who was detained as a terrorist. That wouldn't surprise me. A lot of people were persecuted just for being black and mistreated and detained as terrorists and things like that. That was pretty common during the apartheid era, so I wouldn't surprise if he was unfairly detained as a terrorist. Was he charged or detained? Because this just says detained. Was he charged and sentenced? Even in that case, I would be skeptical, because wasn't Nelson Mandela put in jail for terrorism or something like that, years and years ago? And then I think he was the first president after apartheid ended, if I'm correct, right? Anyway, this guy's just looking for reasons to hate people. No surprise. If you're looking for him, you're going to find him, naturally. Who was detained as a terrorist, is a common liar, who lied to Trump on September 26, 2018, and said there are no killings of white people in South Africa. Well, I'm sure some white people are probably dying every day like they are here in America and literally all over the world. Yeah, people die. This happens. People are victims of crimes sometimes. Yes, that happens. I'm sure people are dying. Is it a systematic top-down thing that's being ordered from the highest levels of government? No, it's not. That's a fabrication. Is a common liar who lied to Trump on September 26, 2018, and said there are no killings of white people in South Africa and that Donald Trump should mind his own business. But a few months later, on July 15, 2020, Ramaphosa had to acknowledge the tens of thousands of white people being killed in South Africa by black people only. Exclusively. Interesting. Like I said, completely made up, like everything this guy says. South Africa has an uncontrollable crime rate committed by black officials in government. Oh, wow. So not only is it being committed by just the black population, but specifically by the members of government, like the congressmen are out there. Only the black congressmen are out there raising the crime rate, committing the crimes themselves. Fascinating. Usually they have lackeys do it, but okay. Committed by black officials in government and their black voters. Mr. Trump's comments have inflamed an already high-octane debate over land in South Africa, a country that remains deeply racially divided and unequal nearly a quarter of a century after the terrorist Nelson Mandela. Oh my God, dude. Nelson Mandela is widely viewed to be one of the most influential and greatest minds in the history of the world. He's calling Nelson Mandela a terrorist. Oh my God. This is insane. This dude is unhinged from reality. Jesus Christ. Nearly a quarter century after the terrorist Nelson Mandela swept to power at the end of apartheid. Well, I feel like I've said enough at this point that everything that this guy says is completely made up, so we're just going to get through it, and if there's something very specific that I think he didn't make up, I'll mention it. All right, let's keep reading. This is an absolutely insane book. Oh my God. The ANC and the EFF are well known for their current terrorist attacks on white people in South Africa, the corrupt style of government, money laundering, drug trafficking, state capture, bribery, and racketeering. Currently, the ANC is planning to take away all land from the Boers, completely made up, their properties and pension funds without compensation. Black police officers and military, black politicians and government officials are involved in all types of crimes in South Africa, especially in cash-in-transit vehicle, heist syndicates, and terrorist attacks on white farmers, which are actually almost a daily occurrence in South Africa. The South African Police Service, SAPS, is one of the most brutal policing systems in the democratic world. The ANC has a history of police brutality and human rights abuses in the country. A huge number of South African police members are convicted criminals. Like I said, South Africa is a developed country, but not as socially developed, or not as far along socially as the United States is. But it should act as a warning to us, like a red flag. This is where we could be eventually. if we don't pull it together, this is how the state of race relations could be, where you have somebody out there writing a book this insane, who's obsessed with white genocide and everything. This is where the U.S. is going right now. This is unhinged stuff. All right, let's keep reading. And like I said, I'm just going to read the section, and at the end of the section, if there's something specific I want to mention, I'll mention it. Police Minister Bekay Sili has been linked to a deeply rooted corruption ring that was allegedly run by the country's crime intelligence, or CI. I guess that's like the CIA? I'm not sure. South Africa has become a mafia state under a terrorist government, the ANC. Complete nonsense. That intimidates whistleblowers. Before Facebook and Twitter banned me from their platforms for being outspoken regarding the terrorist attacks on white people committed by these radical black communists in South Africa. Not communist, again, not radical either. The only correct descriptor there was black, so far as I can tell. I've received numerous death threats trying to intimidate me from stopping me for spreading the word of the current white genocide in South Africa happening. Big Tech has abused this power granted to them by Congress. They censor conservative voices and use algorithms to suppress content that does not fit their narrative. Black people should never have been put in power by the National Party, Democrats, in the first place, for they opened up our borders, give citizenship to illegal immigrants, took away our guns, took Christianity and God out of schools and government, removed our colonist statues, took Afrikaans, our language, and white history out from our schools, established critical race theories in our schools, colleges, and universities, banned white people from the workplace, blamed white people for their own failures, and targeted white people for their own political agendas. God, this is insane. Lowered the passing rate for students to basically nothing in schools. I'm assuming that the idea behind, if this is even true, it's very likely it's not, it's completely made up, but if it's true that they lowered the passing rate, I'd be willing to bet that the Boers, as they call it, like the white colonists there, rose it to a point that it was very difficult, that it basically guaranteed segregation. They kept their kids really, really educated, and they pushed the black population into slums, and then they set the test passing rate or the requirements to get into certain schools or whatever. They set it really high, the bar, so that only the white people would get in, thus enforcing a legal form of segregation. I've seen similar things in like the Jim Crow era, for example. It's pretty common back then. Lowered the passing rate for students to basically nothing in schools, colleges, and universities so that black people can pass to the following grade or semester. Yeah, there you go. That's what I'm talking about. They did the exact same thing in Jim Crow era U.S. They set things up so that the white people would pass and move forward and accomplish things, and the black people wouldn't. They even wrote tests that were intentionally written to be confusing and impossible to pass. Let's just take a look at one out of curiosity. Hang on, let me find it. This is an example of a Louisiana literacy test. I'm not sure what year this is from. This test was used in Louisiana in the late 1950s, leading up to the Civil Rights Act of 1965. So here's the test. Draw a line around the number or letter of this sentence. That's number 1. Number 2, draw a line under the last word in this line. Number 3, cross out the longest word in this line. See, it was intentionally written to be something that a teacher could just fail you for if you didn't answer it the way that they wanted. Draw a line around the number or the letter of this sentence. What does that mean? This is literally unpassable. I mean, I guess you could draw a line under the number 1 here, but is that even right? Is that what they're asking for? Above the letter X, make a small cross. Draw a line through the letter below that comes earliest in the alphabet. Draw a line through the 2 letters below that come last in the alphabet. What does it mean? Does it mean like draw a line between them, draw a line through them, draw a line from this one to that one through the intersecting ones? What does it mean? There are a billion reasons why a teacher could fail you for this test, and I get the impression that is exactly what happened here in South Africa with this guy Helgaard Muller. What he's talking about here, lowered the passing rate for students to basically nothing in schools, colleges, and universities so that black people can pass to the following grade or semester. That's the whole bit. I mean, white colonizers have been doing this to black populations for hundreds of years, all over the world. Longer. probably. It's a manipulation tactic intended to oppress and persecute the people that you view as lesser. So anyway, let's keep reading. So that black people can pass to the following grade or semester. Black people burn down schools, police stations, libraries, municipalities, malls, and shopping centers, all in the name of Black lives. Sound familiar? They say the exact same stuff here in the U.S. about Black Lives Matter. They're constantly screaming about how evil BLM is for burning things down. No evidence, of course. No evidence that they burned down entire cities because they hate white people or any of that nonsense. The list goes on. The ANC have very strong ties with communist China, and they're a driving force also to get rid of the Boers from their valuable land. No evidence, once again, of course. It all started when the NP, the Democrats, stole our referendum in 1992 and gave white South Africa to the ANC terrorists to make it this current quote-unquote hole since April 27, 1994. That's when apartheid ended. Welcome to communist South Africa, where the Boers are ruled by third world immigrants, also known as the communist parasites. Wow. The black population in South Africa are the immigrants in this guy's mind. Is that funny or what? Oh my God. These parasites have bankrupted all state-owned enterprises, all government sectors, municipalities, and there's hardly any functional entity left after these black communists took power in 1994. You'll find raw, untreated sewage flowing in the streets, homes, graveyards, and flowing into the Vaal River, the Vaal Dam, and in the oceans of South Africa. South Africa has fallen over a load shedding tipping point as Eskom, electricity public utility, is the worst it's ever been and is getting worse. God, this guy really hates South Africa. And also, more specifically, black people. I think that's really the point of this whole introduction. He hates black people. I don't know how to make it any clearer. He really does not like the black population. The South African energy crisis is an ongoing period when South Africa experiences widespread rolling blackouts as supply falls behind demand, threatening to destabilize the national grid. It began in the later months of 2007 and continues to this day. South Africa's crisis-hit power supplier has extended daily electricity blackouts from over 2 hours to more than 7 in most parts of the country. People do not realize how close South Africa is to a Zimbabwe, Argentina, Venezuelan type situation. A total economic collapse and Great Depression are unavoidable in South Africa. Well, great! Fantastic. You're out of there. So you don't have to worry about it. Why is he still talking about it? Because he hates the black population. Because he wants to blame every problem South Africa has on black people. That is very obvious at this point. Standard & Poor's Global Ratings, S&P. That's not what S&P stands for. It is! Oh my God! I didn't realize it stood for Standard & Poor for some reason. S&P is basically an index tracking the stock performance. It's called the S&P 500. So they basically take the performance of 500 top companies. Google, Netflix, Apple, Microsoft, Amazon, Alphabet, which is Google, Facebook. They've got a whole big list of various different companies. So they take what the stock value is of each company and they add it in. They add it to the S&P 500 and they get a final number. And that's supposed to be a general idea of how the stock market is performing in any given moment. So the Dow Jones is another index. It's like an industrial average. It doesn't have very many. I think it has 30 index companies that it uses generally. But the Dow Jones is at 30,000 points roughly, or 29,239. What that means is the value of the stocks for each of the indexes in the list. So anyway, that's how you get, index stocks and that number and all that other stuff. All right, let's keep reading. The Standard & Poor, or the S&P, lowered South Africa's sovereign credit rating further into non-investment grade, otherwise known as junk status. You know why South Africa is largely viewed as a risky investment? Because there's so much racial tension. This guy wants to blame it all on the blacks, when in reality, there never should have been segregation. There never should have been apartheid the way there was. He's taking absolutely no responsibility for anything and wants to go back to a period in time when black people were segregated from society and pushed into slums like Jews. It's disgusting. Absolutely disgusting. It is as bad as slavery. the apartheid era in South Africa is. As bad, at least. It's ugly. I cannot stress this enough. Anyway, let's keep reading. So he's complaining about the S&P lowering their credit rating, thanks to all of the racial tension and things like that in the government. Ratings agency Moody's downgraded South Africa's sovereign credit rating to junk status, moving the rating down to BA1 from BAA3 and maintaining a negative outlook. Okay, yeah, I don't think any of this is true. I know a little bit about how this stuff works because I worked in financial technology for financial institutions for a while as a software engineer, but I don't think any of this is true. This does not sound right at all. So just take everything with a grain of salt. If you read something in here, assume it's wrong. These black communists have literally turned South Africa into a shithole. God, he said this like 3 times. This is the actual dream of terrorist Nelson Mandela for South Africa. Oh my God, they're calling Nelson Mandela a terrorist again. This is insane. Everything they've touched ended in ruins. As soon as you stand up for yourself and defend your own people, the Boers of South Africa against these cold-blooded black communist murderers, they and the leftist Jewish media will call you out and mark you as a racist or a white supremacist. Ask me, I know. This guy is a white supremacist, very obviously. I can't believe he's even rejecting the title. I assumed he would embrace it. Anybody who is in favor of apartheid is a white supremacist, period. I don't care what argument you try to throw at me. If you're in favor of apartheid, you're a white supremacist. America, does it sound all familiar to you, what is happening right now here in the United States with Joe Biden, who stole the election from Donald Trump? He did not steal the election. There is zero evidence of election fraud on a systemic level to a degree that it could flip even a single state. There is no systemic fraud taking place. There are a few examples of Republicans, weirdly, voting twice or voting for like their family member who had died recently or whatever. I'm sure a Democrat probably did it, but I haven't seen a single example of it yet. When you have things like this taking place right before the election, it doesn't surprise me to find that there were people voting twice for Donald Trump.
600,000 people could vote by absentee in this state. Are you confident in that system?
Well, they'll go out and they'll vote, and they're going to have to go and check their vote by going to the poll and voting that way because...
You mean vote twice? Is that what Trump just asked them to do? Vote twice?
If it tabulates, then they won't be able to do that. So let them send it in and let them go vote. And if their system's as good as they say it is, then obviously they won't be able to vote. If it isn't tabulated, they'll be able to vote. So that's the way it is.
He just told his supporters to do something illegal. This is from September 2nd, 2020. Is it any surprise that we found a billion examples of Republicans going in and voting twice? And this guy is sitting here claiming that Biden supporters stole the election. Biden was the one that stole it from Trump. Nonsense. God, this is like one long run-on sentence. With Joe Biden, who stole the election from Trump and tried to open your borders to third world immigrants and take away your guns? That's insane. None of that happened. Biden's immigration policy is basically the same as Trump's, and so is the gun policy for the most part. Blaming white people, removing your statues, establishing critical race theories in your schools and colleges, having Joe Biden known as Beijing Biden. I've never heard that name for Joe Biden. Look at previously white South Africa and see for yourself what a shithole it turned out to be after the Democrats stole the referendum in 1992 and gave the country in 94 to third world immigrants. Oh my God, this is insane. No, South Africa has always had roughly the same population of black and white people to my knowledge. It hasn't really changed. You know what changed? You know why he says it used to be white and now it's black? Because it used to be controlled by white people. The government was. And that upsets him deeply. When all you know is privilege, equality feels like oppression. America, are you prepared to be governed by third world immigrants just like the democratic or demonic South Africa? My God, just fear-mongering nonsense all the way down. My story is not about the corruption, murderous, violent black people of South Africa. Jesus Christ, dude. But about Mr. Donald Trump, who is the Christ, and therefore I do not want to or plan to in any means, he means by any means, to ruin and spoil this great book of mine by the corrupt black people of South Africa. This is insane. I've thought long and hard about whether I should write about Mr. Donald Trump, who is the Christ, and I can no longer sit and be quiet about it. I want to shout it from the rooftops and make it known to the world that Mr. Donald Trump is the Christ of this age, and that we are about to enter a new age according to the Hebrew and Greek scriptures of the New Testament. This is going to be huge. Definitely a huge proclamation that Mr. Donald Trump is the Christ. The scriptures are very clear that these nations, quote unquote, will be ruled by the Son of Man with an iron rod. These nations have no idea who Trump is and what is coming their way. They have no idea. So, for I am going to ruin the single-minded in this book, President Donald J. Trump, the Son of Man, the Christ. These narrow-minded people will see how these scriptures are combined and put together into a masterpiece of excellence. Is that what he calls his book, a masterpiece of excellence? Okay. And that it does not contain any degree of religious belief at all, but it is a significant, beautifully written, coded book understood only by the gods and goddesses. Wait, is he talking about his book or the Bible? Maybe he's talking about the Bible. I can't tell. Somebody in the comments let me know what you think. That's crazy, dude. Oh my God. This is nuts. I'm going to have to bleep out so much stuff. Oh my God. I'll tell you what I'm going to do, though. If you want to hear the full uncensored version, you can go to my Patreon, and I'm going to release an audio version that is completely uncensored. So if you want to hear the whole thing, go to my Patreon. Link is in the description. Sign up there. Any level, any tier will have access to the audio version of this. This is absolutely unhinged, man. This is nuts. This is completely nuts. The first chapter is titled The Two Christs. I cannot wait to jump into this and see what he has to say, because it is absolutely unhinged from reality. If you like what you read here, let me know what you think in the comments or on Twitter @TelltaleAtheist. And thanks for sticking it out with me.